Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this webinar on pivoting a business model to support remote learning needs. This webinar is brought to you by Lancome Finance and Management Services Private Limited and Harbinger Interactive Learning. My name is Rahul, and I, along with a colleague of mine, Isha, will be your host for today. Before we get started, some quick housekeeping tips. If you cannot hear the audio, ensure you have selected the right speaker for audio output. Test your speaker to ensure it is working fine from the audio settings option on the lower left corner of your screen. If necessary, you can dial in by using phone, and the dial-in numbers would be available in the link which you would have received along with the webinar registration email. During the course of this webinar, all attendees will be on mute by default. But at any point of time, please feel free to type in your comments in the chat window, or if you have any questions, you can use the Q&A option, or you can select the option of raising a hand. My colleague Isha and myself, we will moderate the questions, take your comments, and guide it and direct it to our speakers. We definitely want this to be an interactive session, so please let your thoughts keep coming in as and when. Now, with that, with the housekeeping away, it's time to meet our first speaker for the day. So with that, let's welcome Dr. Lamba. So hello, Dr. Lamba. Thank you for taking the time out to present on this webinar today.
My pleasure, Rahul. Very happy to be with you today.
Thank you so much again. So Dr. Lamba, to start with, could you please help the audience know you a little better? Could you briefly tell us about yourself?
Okay, I'm a finance professional. I'm a chartered accountant. I used to be a full-time practicing chartered accountant. Very early in fact, the very first year when I passed out and set up practice, I got an invitation to teach in some management college, which I took up pretty reluctantly because thinking I haven't done my chartered accountancy to teach.
Right.
But on second thoughts, I realized it makes sense because unless a professional stays in touch with the subject, you may forget a few things. So it's a good way to keep abreast. With that logic, I accepted the invitation, and I enjoyed the teaching experience so much that it completely consumed me in the years to come. Very soon I had to stop college teaching because college teaching interferes with office hours. So as practice picked up, it became more and more difficult to give lectures in the middle of the working day. So I started tapering that off, but by fluke, corporate invitations had started coming in. Then corporate training was even more fun because those guys were not attending classes to pass exams. They were more interested in the applications, and that was more disciplined. A company would call you and block your calendar weeks in advance. So that didn't interfere with work. And then the training activity continued growing. It was still a hobby. My full-time work was CA practice. I used to teach whenever I was invited, but the number of invitations grew. Then the number of cities from which invitations came grew. Then the number of countries grew. And to cut a long story short, eventually I handed over my practice to a colleague of mine who used to work with me for several years then. And I moved on full-time into education and training. So I have been completely pursuing my hobby. It has been a great journey of fun. I don't feel I have worked a day in my life because every moment is fun. So that's a little background. So we are corporate trainers. We train over almost 3,000 companies across the world, in US, in Europe, in Middle East, in Far East, in Africa, in Russia, in India, and so on. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Lamba. And it's very interesting to know that, not all of us are lucky enough so that, we are able to make our hobbies our profession. And you are definitely one of them, wherein your hobby became a successful profession for you. That's interesting. So on that note, please tell us a little bit about the organization, Lancome Finance and Management Services.
See, Lancome Finance and Management Services was set up even while I was practicing as a CA, because we started providing services which didn't really fit into the chartered accountancy umbrella. So I felt the need for another company. So we provided the whole gamut of financial services. We were, as chartered accountants, we were auditors and we were accountants, and we did company law compliance. But in addition, we formed companies, we made project reports, we raised funds, we had an events division, we had a market survey division, we had an opinion poll division, and of course teaching was there. But coming down to teaching, then we realized the finance is one subject that everybody needs to understand. Anyone who doesn't understand this subject eventually pays a price for it. And it's a matter of time one will realize, an entrepreneur will realize, I better learn finance, otherwise I'm paying a very heavy price. So we discovered, even though this is a hobby and I used to love to stand and teach, but the demand was so much that, I mean, how many days can you teach? Maximum 365 days, which also is humanly not possible. So I realized, how do I reach out to more people? So the knee-jerk reaction of anybody who sees demand is greater than supply is, I should increase the number of trainers. So I went that route, and very, very soon I had 100 trainers with me. And then I realized what a mistake that was. Training is one activity. It's very funny. You can't describe it. You can't hire a trainer because that person may be a huge success or he may fall flat on his face. And another thing you realize is there is no connection between the success of a trainer and the level of knowledge and intelligence. The most knowledgeable people could be utter failures. So knowledge is one component, of course, but that's not the only component. So how do you select a trainer? And I realized if I send 4 trainers in 4 directions, I'm going to get 4 different feedbacks. I'll kill the brand. So we took a very hard decision. And we took a U-turn and we said, there'll be only one trainer, which fortunately or unfortunately was me. And then we said, let's build an ecosystem around a single individual so that there is consistency. Either you be consistently good or you be consistently bad, but consistency is important. So since I could not add on more trainers, or I didn't find that to be the right way to go about it, we started developing products. So very, very early, we created a series of videos. We called them Figure Out the World of Figures. And then we went into e-learning. So I was one of the early guys into technology-driven training, which is all coming in very, very handy with this COVID coming in now. So we were kind of ready we hit the ground running. So along the way, we've created a series of products. But the common factor seems to be, if it's a book, the book is written by me. If it is video, I am there. I mean, the idea is not for me to be everywhere. The idea is the same person, so that if a company is being trained using multiple methodologies, some places I go and teach live, some places they use videos, that everyone gets exposed to the same subject in the same style by the same person. So that consistency remains. And I was given this talk by somebody, experts in the field. I used to always put my company in front earlier on, Lancome. Lancome is the brand, Anil will come as trainer. Where I was explained by some people that, listen, this kind of a product is very individual centric. You can hear 4 people on the same subject. One person may put you to sleep, the other person you may get fascinated by. The subject is the same. So there is some X factor which you can't put your finger on. So this is the model that we have followed. Today, the idea is anybody, anywhere in the world, if you wish to learn finance, we'll have an answer for you. Doesn't matter which country you are in, doesn't matter which industry you belong to, doesn't matter what activity you do, doesn't matter what level you want to be trained, right from the managing director onwards to the lowest level. Hopefully soon we should have an answer that doesn't matter which language you speak. We are trying to bring out our products in every possible language so that we can even break the language barrier. But if you want to learn finance, we should be the one place you must come to.
Thank you so much. And this is definitely a very interesting perspective. I think the key word there was consistency. And, if as an organization, as a service provider, you can be consistently good or consistently bad. But that's one thing which,
Hopefully not bad, but that was,
yeah,
yes.
absolutely. So that's one thing which one should strive for. Very interesting perspective, and specifically, around the finance thing which you spoke about, the subject matter itself. I think I was uh, the other day I was watching one of your videos on YouTube, or some advertisement came there, and it had a very strong statement which said that any person, any leader who's in a leadership role and says that he or she does not needs to know finance might not remain in that role for a long period of time. So that hit me very hard, and I think that's very true to a certain extent. So
Yes.
thank you once again. We are very pleased and excited to have you on this webinar we are looking forward to this conversation. So with that, let me welcome our second guest for the day. So we have Utkarsh with us from Harbinger Interactive Learning. Good morning, Utkarsh. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Rahul. Good morning, Dr. Lamba. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Utkarsh, for taking the time out for this event. So I'm going to make the same set of requests which I made to Dr. Lamba. For our audience, could you please tell us something about yourself, and then also briefly about Harbinger Interactive Learning as an organization?
Sure, Rahul. So, as you know, my name is Utkarsh, and I'm currently working as General Manager at Harbinger Interactive Learning. And I've been developing and selling digital learning products and solutions for the last 14 years. And I'm really excited to be part of today's discussion. Let me briefly talk about Harbinger Interactive Learning as well. So Harbinger Interactive Learning is a global design and development company, and we specialize in helping organizations migrate their classroom training programs to virtual or digital format. And we have been delivering innovative learning solutions for various industry verticals for over 30 years now.
Thank you, Utkarsh. Thank you so much for giving that brief. And
Thank you.
very interesting. I mean, very rarely you'll come across people, or you might, but interesting aspect is that you have involved in developing as well as selling of these learning products. So you kind of understand the entire aspects, the entire 9 yards, if I may say.
I certainly hope.
All right. So once again, thank you so much for being on this event. So with that, now is a time, a moment. Let's take a moment and let's take an audience poll here. Before we take a deep dive in today's topic, and today we are talking about pivoting a business model to support remote learning needs. Now, through this poll, the objective is to get an idea how things are changing around us. And the question is, the poll should be coming up on your screen anytime now. In fact, it should be up there now. And the question that we have is, do you agree that classroom training will not come back soon as one of the preferred training modalities? The options are yes, no, not sure. Right, so 40% people have voted till now. We'll keep it open for another 10 to 15 seconds. Thank you very much for participating in this. It is up to 68% now. Just another 5 seconds, we'll keep it open. All right, so let's end the poll and let's look at the results. So basically, 64% people are saying that they agree that the classroom training will not come back soon as one of the preferred training modalities. 29% feel the other way, which means they feel that there is a chance, which means actually they feel that classroom training will come back as the preferred training modality, and 7% are not sure. Right, so 64% still feel that's a considerable sizable number who feel that, we are emerging towards a new normal. Actually, as we all are experiencing throughout the world, The evolving COVID-19 pandemic has created, unprecedented humanitarian, economic, and psychological demands on our societies and businesses. There isn't anything that has been untouched, actually. Recently I read a statement from Airbnb CEO, and he said that because of the pandemic, the entire 12 years of efforts that Airbnb had put together in building this business was crushed in a span of 6 weeks. Now, that's some kind of magnitude of impact. One of the important business needs for organizations during these times has been to quickly figure out new ways of doing things, identifying potential opportunities, and then swiftly moving in that direction. In fact, businesses across the globe have been successfully making this pivot at different times, not just in this pandemic situation, but even in previous some other situations as well, time to time. For example, you would be amazed to know that YouTube started as a dating site. And I got to know this like a couple of weeks back. It initially started as a dating site, and its first slogan was tune in, hook up. And now we know what YouTube is. And today, we add another success story to the list, and we would hear it straight from Dr. Lamba as to how successfully he ensured the pivot for his business. So, Dr. Lamba, at this stage, we would request you if you could please tell us briefly as to what your business model was pre-pandemic, prior to this COVID-19 situation.
Okay, so far as my teaching and training activity goes, the methodology used was, we train in two ways. We train companies or on invitation. So these are called in-company programs. And every once in a while, we organize public program, open programs. So in an in-company program, if there are 20, 30 people in the room, all of them belong to one company. In an open program, if there are 20, 30 people, they are representing maybe 5, 10, 15 companies. Somebody sends 2, somebody sends 3, and so on. Now, in-company program, and since I love to teach, so any case, I need to stand and teach every day because that's what gives me my adrenaline rush. So I used to travel. I was traveling all the while. I was traveling maybe 20, 25 days a month. Nationally, internationally, and we would go to companies and at a venue of their choice, hold live training programs. Of course, I always used products also because, like I said, the need for finance training is huge. Like there is a large infrastructure company where in single company we are training 100,000 people, which obviously you cannot do in face-to-face programs. It will take God knows how many years to reach out. So we use live training where I go, then they have taken licenses for my videos and put up on their intranet. We have created some 46 modules of e-learning and so on. So this was the method used earlier on. So far as my physical training is concerned, I was training live, but to take it down the line, we were using these other techniques. Books are being used. And public program I used to do, again, physically. We would book a place, we would go to a particular town, and so the people from that town and some people would travel from other places because they were keen to do it. And since it is not happening in their town, they would come to where we were. Post-COVID, we went the webinar route. And I suddenly found, it used to always bother me because I know the subject that I teach is so critical. Most businesses in the world that fail, they fail due to financial mismanagement. And a business failure is easy to say, but what does it mean? It means excellent businesses have shut down. Banks have been defaulted on. Employees have lost jobs. Vendors have lost money. Shareholders. I mean, it's crazy. And the reason is financial mismanagement. And what we teach helps them make sure that doesn't happen to them. So what we teach is critical. So and it's already people realize. Entrepreneurs, because they suffer the consequences, somewhere along the line they realize we need to understand this. So what used to bother me was when I stand in a room and talk to 20, 30 people, I used to always feel, the relevance of what I'm saying is, I wish there were not 20, 30, but 20, 30,000 people or even more. And why am I speaking to so many people in a room? Whereas this what I'm talking should be broadcast all over. I mean, this was always at the back of our mind, how to reach out to more number of people. Suddenly we realize, and because you're always busy traveling, it's at the back of your mind, you don't do much to address it. But now, thanks to COVID and you're all confined to home, so we started doing webinars. And now I realize there is no confinement. Number one, you don't need to travel, even though I love to travel. I would like to still travel, but you don't need to travel to teach. Number two, you are not confined by the four walls. So there is no limit to how many people. So your message, if you have an important message to deliver, I can't understand. I mean, no longer, I think your question was, will classroom training come back? So far as I'm concerned, my public programs, we've decided to stop all public programs where we'll teach face-to-face. Because now the reach has become so much. All our corporate programs also, we will give an option to every client. If you wish, I'll come to your premises and teach. But if you're okay with online, I think we will let everybody be at their own location and we'll do a webinar. So this is what we have now switched to. And since I have a new series of e-learning products made by Harbinger, very, very delightful products that you have made. So the product was made before COVID hit. We didn't know, but it's coming. It will come in so handy now. So we'll deliver training through live programs online. We can deliver through videos. We can deliver through e-learning programs through an LMS that we're planning to install on our site. And of course, we have books, etc. So I think there is a drastic change. There is a sea change. And this sea change is so positive. And incidentally, we have shrunk our prices by about 40% also. Because we hope what one will lose due to reduction of price, one should more than make up by increase in the volumes. So this is the change. I'm not an expert in these things, guys, but this is so far. So I can only share my experience. When you said, will classroom training come back? For certain activities, it might. It may not be amenable for delivery through online methodology. But so far as my training is concerned, I think it's been a blessing in disguise.
Right, Dr. Lamba. And yes, absolutely. After hearing you, it sounded like definitely this COVID thing has come across as a blessing in disguise, which has is reduced on the efforts that you would spend logistically, because for someone like you, who's crisscrossing the globe and traveling across countries and cities, it might be, it's eventually eating up on your time, on your productivity days, and this outreach that you can certainly increase. And then the good news is, or the good thing that happened, that in parallel, it was not just this face-to-face trainings that you were doing, you were developing other resources as well. For example, the books, the digital learning material, all those things. And so a combination of all these things together can come in very handy to create an ecosystem, like you were saying initially, to help your learners and help your business prosper and grow. And
in my case, it forced me to do it because, like we said, we decided there will be a single trainer. So that became for me the trigger. If there's going to be a single trainer, then you need more products of that trainer so that the person can, one thing that I used to think earlier on, I am in the field of, we are providing a service. Teaching is a service. And if you're providing a service, the growth, there is a ceiling. If I have to stand and talk, I can't go beyond the four corners of this room. So at the back of my mind was always how to convert the service into a product. So the books and videos and e-learning was an attempt to productize a service so that it can become mass producible, so that you don't hit that ceiling. That was the logic. And that happened, of course, well before COVID and these things hit.
Right. And I think some of these things that you mentioned, some of these changes that you mentioned that were happening in parallel, which are helping you tide through this COVID situation, these would come in very handy to the training providers, businesses who are in this line of things as to how to mitigate the challenges. There's one comment from one of our attendees, and I would like to In fact, there are a couple of them. I would just like to read it out for everyone. So the first comment is, hospitality industry suffered a lot during COVID. Teaching and training could improvise from ILT to virtual instructor-led training route to survive and later thrive. That's an interesting statement. First survive and later thrive. Thank you for putting that. The other one is, the other comment that we have is, blended learning looks a good thought to reach masses and cater as per their learning preference. I think this is in line with Dr. Lamba, some of your views that you were sharing.
Yes.
And we also have one question, and if you're okay, Dr. Lamba, can we take this question in between?
By all means, of course.
Okay, right. So the question that we have is, what level of technical skills one should have to be able to deliver these webinars or virtual live sessions?
That question is to me, right?
Yes, that is correct.
I've always called myself as technologically challenged. And if I have adopted so easily to this method of delivery, I think your answer will be the level of technological skills required is very, very minimal. Fortunately, these softwares that have been created are so user-friendly that frankly, it hardly takes a few minutes to get used to them. And my experience has been so good that you can almost bring alive the same experience that you give during a face-to-face training program in this methodology. Feedback I have received from people who've done my courses is, very often they say, I almost forgot we are not in a classroom kind of a session. You get so involved. And in fact, I think in certain ways, it is even more powerful. Because in a classroom, if there are 20 people sitting over there, you're talking to, your eye contact happens to one person at a time. And you're not giving the same attention to everybody. But here, so even if there are 1,000 people attending, so far as that person is concerned, it's a one-to-one training. That single person can, so everybody feels they're getting a personal attention. And if one gets used to doing your presentation and talking and probably looking at the chat box and answering questions as they come up, then I think the energy level is also the same. The interactivity is also the same. And I don't feel it takes away. I think it probably adds on to that experience. So this is a very pleasant experience I have had.
Thank you, Dr. Lamba. That's very encouraging, I think, for the audience as well to hear that it's very easy. It's a matter of minutes to adapt to this. And I just wanted to read out one more comment from our audience for you. So, productizing your service, great thought towards designing a business model.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Lamba, for sharing all this. Now, let's take a few moments to conduct another audience poll. And this time the objective is to get an idea as to what is this which is driving this change in the business model. So the poll should be coming up on your screens now any moment. So just give me one moment. It should be on your screens now. Yes, and the question that we have is, do you agree that training providers need to make a pivot around their business models to support the remote learning needs of their customers? The options are yes, no, and not sure. So we have 47% people who have voted till now. Thank you once again for actively participating in this. We'll keep it open for another 5 to 7 seconds. All right, so thank you very much for participating in this. We'll end the poll now and we'll look at the result. So as I think most of us would have been expecting, 88% people have said yes, that remote learning is the need of the hour that's making businesses pivot their model, who are specifically in the area of providing training, learning services, education. And 12% people have said not sure. There's no one who has said no. So 88% people feel that remote learning is the need. Thank you once again for actively participating in this. So with that, now let's turn to Utkarsh and understand in a little bit detail as to what do we actually mean by remote learning? Is this another jargon or, what is it? So Utkarsh, could you please share some insights with us and help us understand what remote learning is all about?
Sure, Rahul. So in simple terms, remote learning is something that happens outside a traditional classroom because the learner and the trainer are separated by distance or time. So remote learning could be synchronous or asynchronous, and the role of the technology could also vary because you cannot assume that every remote learner will have access to adequate technology infrastructure to receive the learning.
And thank you, Utkarsh, for laying down the definition of remote learning simply. And I think one of the key things that you mentioned is the role of technology can vary, and we should be mindful about this because the primary reason for the variance is, as you said, that technology net neutrality. People are talking about internet neutrality. So does everyone on this planet has equal access to internet? So those are the things that we need to keep in mind, and that is where I think it starts differentiating itself from the traditional digital learning or e-learning, and that is why one of the reasons we start calling it remote learning. So, so for our friends in the L&D community, the professionals in the L&D community, do you have some guiding thoughts, some guidelines, or is there any kind of playbook that we can follow in terms of how to go about implementing a remote learning strategy?
Sure, Rahul. So it just happened that in last 3-4 months, we started getting a lot of requests from our customers in terms of they wanted help in developing remote learning programs. And based on the solutions that we proposed to our customers, the solutions that we implemented, and the various case studies that came across, we could develop a framework that we call as the PESE model. Simply, PESE stands for prepare, engage, support, and then evaluate. And this framework helps you successfully implement a remote learning program. And these are 4 distinct phases of this framework that we can take a deep dive into each of these phases.
Thank you, Utkarsh. In fact, that would be very helpful if you can walk us through these 4 phases. And specifically, my personal favorite is the engage part. Dr. Lal also kind of shared his perspective on the engagement aspect of it, but we'd like to hear from you as well as to what are some of those things which we can do to keep our audience engaged in the remote learning environment.
Absolutely. So we will start with the very first step, that is prepare. This is the foundation for a successful training program. So it's important that you start with specifying what is the business challenge that you're trying to solve. And all the stakeholders, you have to make sure that all the stakeholders are on the same page. You have to also understand and learn about your audience, who they are, what they need, where are they. And when you know that, that would help you in designing the learning modality. So it could be a simple virtual instructor-led session, or it could use game-based assessments, or you can have videos and interactivities. It is also important that you define the role of technology at this point of time and make sure that you have adequate technology in-house. And if not, if you need help, then get that help at this point of time. And lastly, in the prepare stage, you have to make sure that you understand your trainers as well and see if they need some kind of support or upskilling to deliver learning over a web meeting. So that's the prepare stage, and let's quickly move to the engage part. I feel engage is a key. Engagement is something that that you have to make sure that is constant throughout the journey. So engagement is not just limited to during the session, during the session, you have to keep your audience engaged, but it has to start pre-event. So let's say before you are planning to deliver a learning program, if you can just quickly prepare a teaser video to encourage and motivate learners to come and join and participate in the program. During the program, you can make use of interactivities, polls, some games, or use very sleek and modern design to engage the learner. And not just that, post-event as well, you have to make sure that you keep the audience engaged, you keep your learners engaged, and there you can make use of nudging to reinforce training. You can provide them with some job aids that they can use whenever they need, or even create some kind of competitive exercises so that they can participate it within small groups. After engage comes the third pillar, and that is support. Now, support is a continuous process. You need to support your learners throughout the process, during the session, after the session, before the session. So one simple example could be if you want to support your learners post-event, then can you create something like a AI-based virtual coach that can be integrated with the office productivity tools like MS Teams or Slack, and provide support learners at the time of need. So that's where you can support your learners throughout the learning journey. And lastly, we come to the evaluate stage. It is extremely important for a training organization to understand and to check if what their training objectives were, and if the training was meeting the success parameters that they set for themselves. And based on their findings, they should do the course correction. Based on the evaluation, they should do the course correction and see if whenever they are relaunching the program, they implement those changes and then relaunch the program so that the performance and the learners can get better quality learning. So that's the framework that we have proposed. We call it prepare, engage, support, evaluate, PESE. I hope it helps.
Absolutely. Thank you, Utkarsh, for walking us through this framework, the PESE model: prepare, engage, support, evaluate. Every pillar has its own relevance and importance in the life cycle of remote learning. So this is one useful guide that we have. And we have one question. So if it's okay, can we take that question in between? And this question is directed for Dr. Lamba. So Dr. Lamba, I'll read out this question for you. So someone in our audience wants to know that, do you think soft skills or behavioral training can be successfully delivered in remote learning mode using, or maybe using this model that Utkarsh just spoke about: prepare, engage, support, evaluate?
I am not a soft skills trainer, but I would think so. I would think so, because soft skills doesn't need too much of props and gadgets and so on. So I would think it is absolutely amenable for delivery through remote learning.
Right. Thank you. And so in terms of now moving our conversation ahead, so Dr. Lamba, what we would like to understand from you is, of course, we heard the story, we understood what remote learning is about, we understood the transition that your business made, and some of it was not forced because you were already moving in that direction, but the situation might have propelled it a little further. So as a business owner who's in this line of providing training, education services, what are some of those key things that we should consider or keep in mind?
Consider for what? To make this shift?
Yeah, while making this shift, when things are changing around us, the way the business was currently being done, it's being changing.
Okay. I can again share what I did. I'm not an expert at this. Utkarsh is. I'm not, but I can share what my experience has been. And in the last 3 months, I must have done about 50 one single session programs and about half a dozen programs which were ran over 6 days, 8 days, 15 days, and so on. So I can share. Now I use a presentation, of course. I use a keynote. But I realized when you're face to face, you have the luxury of a whiteboard and a pen. So anything your people don't understand or they need more clarification, there's something on presentation and you want to elaborate on it, you pick up a pen, you go to the board and you show them. Suddenly you realize here also whiteboarding is possible. But I find it better. I prefer not to get distracted. I'm not that, let's say, fond of moving from break the link of my discussion and move to a whiteboard and so on, and sometimes start fumbling looking for it. So I find it easier if I can anticipate where I would need more elaboration and make those changes in the presentation itself. For example, another advantage you have in a classroom is, let's say you have a pointer. You're saying something, there's an important figure or a statement, you point it out on the screen and show it to them. Here you can't do that. Or maybe you can and I don't know it. Maybe there's some option of doing it. So what I find is I kind of visualize where I will need to emphasize. And I've already used animation to either circle something or highlight something. So if you can do that, if you can anticipate, if you know your subject in and out, then probably it's easier. So by experience, I will know when I'm talking, somebody will need to know more about this. Or suddenly I'm talking, there are 100 figures over there, one figure pops up in a classroom session, I would have pointed it out here. Either I'd give it a different color or a different size or do something. So if these small changes are made, because each one is sitting in front of their screen, you are showing something and talking, but the fellow may not have seen it. And then what you talk may not even make sense. So far as my subject is concerned, I feel these minor changes I had to make. Otherwise, whatever I was using in the earlier method, I could easily, seamlessly move it into remote learning, and that used to work.
Right. Thank you. And so after, I think the message that we are getting from you is it's no rocket science. The things that you were doing earlier,
if I can do it, anyone can do it.
Right. So we just have to make some minor adjustments, learn on the go. Don't worry if you don't get it right the first time in the first session. You'll get it right the second time or the third time. Continue doing it. I mean, keep focus on your, the content should be good and keep your learner engaged. I think these two things would be key, and some of these best practices that we just spoke about. And I think one thing, Dr. Lamba, that you pointed out in the conversation earlier is looking at the entire pricing model as well, somewhere down the line.
Correct.
So that's also important for business owners. So that's one thing. Be flexible. Think of new ideas. The other thing that you mentioned about look at productizing some of your services so that you can increase the outreach. So thank you very much. I think these were some very insightful things, and very encouraging to hear from someone like you in terms of it's a seamless transition. You don't have to do too many things differently to get it right. Just have to adapt a little bit and keep moving.
Seamless transition, but my point is, even if there are others over here with a different product, different activity where little effort might be required, please take that effort, because the advantages far outweigh the efforts, and even if there is a little cost involved. Like I said, price goes down, more people can afford it, so your customer base grows. It not only becomes cheaper for your customers in terms of fee, but they save money for traveling, they save money for hotels, they save money for anything. You as a trainer also save money. You don't have to, sometimes we give study material as bound books and you give a pen and you give other things. Here, none of that. Everything goes online. So it's an absolutely win-win situation. And if once you taste the advantages of this, you will find it as a trainer. If you're a trainer, you will find it very, very difficult to go back to the old methods. So take the effort, go ahead, and I think you will be glad you took the effort.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lamba, for those comments. I think this was very wonderful conversation that we had with you and Utkarsh. And Utkarsh, thank you so much for walking us through that framework, the prepare, engage, support, evaluate. Uh, we are running a little late on schedule, but we'll open our lines for discussion now. And I would request our audience to please type in their questions, comments, either in the Q&A box or in the chat section. We'll take them up. And right, and we have one which probably I'll direct towards you, Utkarsh. So someone in our audience would like to know in terms of what are some of the ways through which we could reinforce the actual learning that has happened in a virtual instructor-led training environment? You know, post the VILT session, how can we reinforce the learning, keep the learner engaged, and support them throughout the learning journey?
Sure. So once the event is over, the training is delivered, it's important that you share some or you help the learners in their learning journey. So for reinforcement, you can use nudge learning. That's one way of doing it. Simply creating small learning nuggets that you can share with them after a certain period of time so that they can relearn if they have forgotten something. A small micro video would also help in nudging learners once the training is over.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Utkarsh, for this. This is very helpful. Dr. Lama, there's another question for you. I'll read out the question for you. So, how do you ensure learners got the concepts which were taught?
You know, the same way I do in a face-to-face classroom. Only thing is I can't see them, eye contact, but they keep interacting. You keep asking questions, you make them answer. They feed in their questions in the chat box. Everybody is encouraged, please ask questions. Every now and then you stop and say, okay, tell me what I said, is it clear? Anyone wants to ask? So those who don't understand will probably, put their question. So the interactivity is constant, and for, of course, it's also depends on the learner. If somebody is listening and doesn't understand and keeps mum and doesn't ask, you can't help it there. But anyone who takes the effort to, can you please repeat? You said, all right, I'll be happy to repeat. Some people say, can you go back to that page on the presentation? You go back. So there's no difference. This is what they would have done in a face-to-face session, and this is what they do on an online program.
Right. And I agree with you there. There's another one, Dr. Lamba, if you can, and I think I'll keep it open for both Dr. Lamba, you and Utkarsh, if you want to share your thoughts on this one. So how do you justify return of investment of remote learning to corporate stakeholders?
Utkarsh?
Sure. As Dr. Lamba rightly said, that if there is an initial investment required, the returns are so high that you will be able to justify it easily. I mean, for example, if you are saving a lot on travel costs, if you are not booking a hotel to stay or to bring the learners there, you're saving on a lot of money. And if there is a way that you can use videos, if you record it once and then deliver it multiple times, that's one way of saving a lot of money as well. So I guess it's justifiable to go for remote learning because the return on investment is very high. What do you think, Dr. Lamba?
I completely agree with you, Utkarsh. First of all, what is the investment on the part of the corporate? I think the investment, in fact, has gone down. Earlier on, they would pay you a professional fee, which I think now has gone down a bit. And in addition, as you pointed out, if there are 20 people, and very often my experiences when I'm training, the company not only invites people from different parts of the country, they even invite them from different parts of the world. So these costs are in fact far greater than the cost of the trainer also. And then the accommodation and logistics and everything. So all that is gone. So in fact, the cost to the organization goes down drastically. Value doesn't go down because this is what you would have taught when you go there. This is what you teach online. So I think the ROI shoots up, in fact.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Lamba and Utkarsh, for sharing this. This is very helpful. I think we are just over our time slot by a few minutes. So I would request our audience, if you have any questions, additional questions, thoughts, comments, please do drop us a line on the email ID listed here, and we'll arrange to get the answers across to you. I just wish we would have some more little time, or maybe we could, probably schedule a follow-up conversation around this. This is such an interesting topic. Hearing some great insights from Dr. Lamba and Utkarsh here. So thank you so much once again, Dr. Lamba, for taking the time out.
Pleasure, pleasure.
Thank you, Utkarsh, for sharing your insights today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you to the audience for actively participating in this event. Hope you enjoyed it. Everyone who has registered or attended this event will get a recording of this webinar, so you can view it at your own time. And yes, of course, please feel free to drop us a line, info@harbingerlearning.com. We'll keep the webinar link open for another few minutes or so. We'll just hang out here. So if you want to leave any closing comments or thoughts, thank you once again. Have a great day, great evening ahead, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you, Rahul.